Thanks, Barry. I'm going to tell you a story now about a surrogate father. This is about a couple that couldn't have children, so they rented or hired a surrogate father. And the story is going to be told by Liz Ness.
Good evening. Good evening. Lovely crowd. I'm going to tell you a little story about the Smith family. Mr. and Mrs. Smith were very happily married, had been for some time, but sadly were unable to conceive children of their own. So they decided that they would employ the services of a surrogate father. On the day the proxy father, that is, proxy father, was due to arrive, Mr. Smith was getting ready to leave for work. He kissed his wife goodbye and said, "Darling, don't worry, don't be so nervous. Everything's going to be fine. The man will be here soon, and I know he will be very gentle with you." Half an hour later, just by chance, a door-to-door baby photographer happened to ring their doorbell, hoping he could make a sale. "Morning, madam. I've come to..." Mrs. Smith opened the door and said, nervously and excitedly, "Don't explain. I've been expecting you." "Have you really?" the photographer said. "Well, that's good. Because did you know babies are my speciality?" "Well, I hope so," Mrs. Smith said. "It's what my husband and I have been hoping for. Do come in and have a seat." Well, after a moment or two, Mrs. Smith blushed and said, "Well, where do we start?" "Leave everything to me," he said. "I usually like to try 2 in the bath, 1 on the couch, and maybe a couple on the bed. Sometimes the living room floor can be fun. We can really spread out there. Bathroom, living room floor? Oh, well, no wonder it hasn't worked for Harry and me," she said. "Well, madam, none of us can guarantee a good shot every time. But if we try different positions, and I shoot from 6 or 7 angles, I'm sure you'll be pleased with the result." "That sounds an awful lot," she said. "Madam, in my line of work, I have to take my time. I mean, I'd love to be in and out in 5 minutes. But you would be very disappointed with that." The photographer opened his briefcase and pulled out a portfolio of baby pictures to show her. This one was done on top of a bus. Oh my goodness. And these twins turned out exceptionally well when you consider the mother was so difficult to work with. She was difficult. Oh yes, I'm afraid so. I finally had to take her to the park to get the job done. People were crowding round us, 4 or 5 deep, to take a look. "My goodness, 4 or 5 deep," she said. "It took us 3 hours. The mother kept squealing and yelling. I couldn't hardly concentrate. And when darkness came, I had to rush my shots. Squirrels kept nibbling on my equipment. Just as I was about to shoot, so I had to pack it in." "You mean squirrels actually chewed on your equipment?" "That's the truth, madam." "Well, if you're ready, I'll set up my tripod and get to work." "Your tripod?" "Oh, yes, madam. I use my tripod to rest my cannon on. It's much too big to be held by hand." Mrs. Smith fainted.